Okay, section 2.7. We're going to continue with what we did with synthetic division. What we're going to let rest is long division. Okay, so you'll need it for the test, but we're not going to use that on a daily basis because synthetic division is a little bit easier to do. So here's the deal. When we have a dividend and we divide it by a divisor, we get a quotient plus a remainder over the divisor. So I think that initial problem we did, when we did 59 divided by 4, we said that that was 14 plus, what is that, 3 over 4, something like that. We did this problem. So the dividend divided by the divisor gives me a quotient plus a remainder over the divisor. When we did this with polynomials, same things. F of x divided by a polynomial, I get a quotient plus I get a remainder over the divisor. Okay. Now, if the remainder is 0, so if the remainder happens to be 0, this thing simplifies tremendously. So if the remainder is 0, this is what I get. F of x divided by d of x is equal to q of x. So if the remainder is 0, when I divide it, I end up with 2 what of that polynomial? 2 factors. Okay, so that's what we're after. So what we're thinking of now, we're switching gears. Synthetic division isn't just this fun activity for a Friday night now. Synthetic division is going to be a way we factor polynomials. Okay, so we need it. If I can get a 0 remainder, that helps me factor it, because we're going to start factoring polynomials that are 3rd or 4th degree, and they may not work with grouping or other methods. So this is why we're going to use synthetic division to make that work. So we need to get a little bit of practice of doing this. Okay, so let's look at this polynomial. Got a polynomial, and I'm telling you that x minus 3 is a factor. So what I want to do is I want to solve that. I want to factor it completely. So how does that help me knowing that x minus 3 is a factor? What does that mean? What does it mean I can do? Well, I mean, if 5 is a factor of 35, what can you do with 35 and 5? You can take 35 and you divide it by 5 and you get a number that is what? 7. So you started with one factor, but you ended up with 2 factors. If I give you one factor, you can figure out the other. So what this is saying is, if x minus 3 is a factor, then when you divide by x minus 3, your remainder should be 0. Okay, so what we're going to do, if I divide by x minus 3, so I need to be very comfortable with that. Tells me that, so x minus 3 is a factor. And if that's the factor, when you set it equals 0, what is the solution? What happens when you set x minus 3 equal to 0? Yeah, x equal 3 is and you're going to see lots of these words. It is a 0. It is a root. It is a solution. Those things are all interchangeable, okay? So if x minus 3 is a factor, x equal 3 is the solution. So when I set this up with synthetic division, what number goes on the outside? The positive 3. So I would do this. Now, regardless of how many times I did this, there were people that missed this on the test. You've got to make sure when you set this up that you account for every space. X cubed, x squared, x, constant. It's all fun and games as long as every number is there, but when one of these is missing, you've got to do a 0 placeholder. There are several people that missed that. So I've got a 2, negative 11, 3, and 36. So the 2 comes down, 3 times 2 is 6. Negative 11 plus 6 is what? Negative 5. 3 times negative 5, I get negative 12. 3 times negative 12, negative 36, I get a 0. Was that what I was expecting? Yes. If x minus 3 is a factor, I expect this to be 0. Now, what if that were not 0? Then what do you know? Yeah, it means that either you made a mistake or I made a mistake, because I told you that x minus 3 is a factor. If you don't get a 0, then either I was lying or you made a mistake or something, whatever the case is. So if I'm giving you x minus 3 as a factor, you expect to get this as an answer. If you don't get it, hopefully it's, I don't mean this negative, hopefully you made the mistake. Hopefully I've checked it and I know that's true. So if you don't get a 0 there, go back and check your arithmetic, okay? So what does this mean, this 2 minus 5, 12? What does that mean here? Yeah, but this is what, 2 what? X squared minus 5x minus 12, okay? So I now know that this original polynomial, 2x cubed minus 11x squared plus 3x plus 36 is equal to, what are the two factors that I know now? The factor is x minus 3. What's the other factor? 2x squared minus 5x minus 12. Okay? If my goal is to factor this completely, where do you think I need to spend my time now? Yeah, on this guy right here. So I need to spend my time right there and see, does that factor? Okay, this will factor, and we've done this method many times, if I can find two numbers that multiply to what? Negative 24, and add to give me what? Negative 5. What numbers can do that? Negative 8, positive 3. Is the answer x minus 8, x plus 3? No, because this number starts with a number that's other than 1. Okay, so I have to write this so that I can factor by what method? Grouping. So 2x squared minus 8x plus 3x minus 12. What do the first two terms have in common? 2x, x minus 4, plus 3, x minus 4. So this is what? 2x plus 3 times x minus 4. So the complete factorization here is what? It's x minus 3, and then what? Yeah, 2x plus 3, x minus 4. So what I did is I started out with a third degree polynomial. Once the synthetic division worked, I no longer had a third degree, I had a what degree? Second degree. Another word for a second degree is a what? Quadratic, and we know how to work with quadratics. Okay, so that's the complete factorization. Now, what is the solution? Okay, I set each factor equal to 0, and I get what? Yeah, negative 3 halves and 4. Those are all the zeros, okay? Those are all the zeros of this polynomial. That's going to help us when we start graphing it, okay? So what you need is the ability to start with a function, okay? Here is our function. We're trying to solve, here we're trying to solve this thing equal to 0. So if I'm solving this thing equals 0, I don't want to be sloppy. Let me just make all of this here. Solving this thing equal to 0, I have to factor completely, set each factor equal to 0, okay? So not a whole lot that was new here, okay? Here's something you got to be really comfortable with, because this is going to come up all throughout this unit. If x minus a is a factor, then x equal a is the root or solution or 0 or x-intercept. Those all mean the same thing, okay? So in this case, if x minus 4 is the factor, what is the solution? X equal 4, okay? So if x minus 4 is the factor, x equal 4 is the solution or the 0. So if I need to factor this thing completely, okay? To factor this completely, I know that x minus 4 is a factor. I'll do synthetic division. What number goes on the outside? 4, okay? So I set this up with 2, minus 11, 10, and 8. And I always just double check. This is my x cubed, my x squared, my x, and my constant. So the 2 comes down. 2 times 4 is 8. Add those to get minus 3. 4 times negative 3. That's negative 2. 4 times negative 2. And that is a 0. So that means that x minus 4 is a factor. Okay, so f of x, this polynomial, is x minus 4 times what? Two x squared, yeah, minus 3x minus 2. Now what part needs to be factored? Which of these can I factor? The quadratic. So I need to find two numbers that do what? Yeah, multiply to -4 and add to -3. So those numbers are what? And -4 and +1. So I can write this as 2x squared minus 4x plus x minus 2. These first two terms having 2x in common. X minus 2 plus x minus 2. So this is what? 2x plus 1 times x minus 2. So what is the complete factorization of this polynomial? It's f of x equal, what was the first factor that I knew before I even started? Yeah, x minus 4. And then the other factors are 2x plus 1 and x minus 2. If I were to ask you solve when that thing is equal to 0, when would this thing now be equal to 0? At 4, -1/2, and 2. Okay? So we're solving and factoring all of these guys. So let's look at this one. I'm given a third degree polynomial and I know that x equal 10 is a 0. So if x equal 10 is a 0, another word for that is a root, a solution, an x-intercept. Those all mean the same thing. What is the factor? X minus 10. So x minus 10 is a factor. So which of these will I use to set up the synthetic division? The 10 or the -10? The 10. So I'm going to set this up 10, and then I just need to copy down these numbers. 4, -25, -154, and 40. Okay, this should correspond to my x cubed, my x squared, my x, and my constant, and it does. So you bring the 4 down. 4 times 10 is 40. Subtract that and you get 15. 10 times 15 is 150. And that leaves you with what? A -4. 10 times -4 is -40, which leaves you with a 0. So that means that x minus 10 is a factor. So this polynomial is f of x equal what? X minus 10. And then what am I left with? 4x squared plus 15x minus 4. Okay, now where I need to focus my time and energy and factoring the quadratic. So I need to find two numbers that multiply to what? -16 and add to +15. So what numbers do that? So the numbers that do this are what? 16 and -1. Okay. So I can write this polynomial as what? 4x squared plus 16x minus x minus 4. And then I factor by what method? Grouping. So this is 4x, x plus 4 minus x plus 4. So this is 4x minus 1 times x plus 4. So that tells me my final factorization is f of x equal x minus 10, 4x minus 1, and x plus 4. Okay, pretty straightforward, right? I mean, you just need to get real comfortable with synthetic division, and factoring quadratics is one of those things you are just not going to get out of until you leave this class, and then it comes back in your next class that you take. So it's here to stay for a while. So given that x minus 2 is a 0, what is the factor? What does that mean? Yeah, I can look at that and tell you that x plus 2 is a factor. Because if I set x plus 2 equal to 0, what do I get? X is negative 2, and I know that that's a 0. So when I set up the synthetic division, what goes on the outside here? No, negative 2. The solution number is always on the outside. And so let's just see, I've got 5, negative 9, negative 42, negative 8. So you bring down the 5, you multiply to get negative 10, negative 19, multiply to get 38, add to get negative 4, multiply to get 8, and you get a 0. So this tells me that f of x is what? What are the two factors I know? X plus 2, that one was given, so really don't want to miss that one, okay? And what's the other one? Yeah, 5x squared minus 19x minus 4. And now where do I spend my time? On the quadratic. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to what? Yeah, negative 20 and add to negative 19. So what numbers possess those magical properties? Yeah, negative 20, positive 1. So that tells me this can be written as 5x squared minus 20x plus x minus 4. So factor by grouping. This is 5x, x minus 4 plus x minus 4. So what is that? 5x plus 1 times x minus 4. So this final factorization is f of x equal x plus 2, 5x plus 1, x minus 4. Is that it? Okay, questions over there?